What if the most dangerous thing in your garden is already growing there? Not a pest, not a disease, a plant, something you may have chosen yourself, lovingly placed in the soil, watered, and admired, slowly working against everything else you've built. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 20 plants that can quietly devastate your garden, and some of them might genuinely shock you. Stay until the end, because number 13 on this list wages chemical warfare on its neighbors, and number 20 can swallow an entire acre before you even realize what's happening. Intro 0.15 to 1.00. Warm music fades in, soft guitar, or ambient garden sounds. Welcome back to Rooted Aura, the place where we slow down, get our hands in the soil, and talk about gardening the honest way. Now, most of us come to gardening with the best intentions. We flip through seed catalogs, we walk the nursery aisles, we carefully research what will thrive in our space, what the deer will leave alone. What will look gorgeous in that sunny corner by the fence. But here's what nobody tells you at the nursery. Some of the most beautiful plants in those little pots, the ones featured in glossy garden magazines, the ones your neighbor planted 5 years ago, are quietly capable of turning your peaceful backyard into an absolute battleground. And the scary part? Most gardeners don't find out until it's too late. So today, we're going through 20 plants, ranked from mildly frustrating all the way to genuinely catastrophic, so you can make smarter choices before they cost you years of regret. Let's dig in. Main content. Number 1, bamboo, the underground invader, soft transition sound. Let's open with a plant that has one of the most deceptive personalities in the gardening world. Bamboo, specifically the running varieties, looks like a dream. Tall, elegant, swaying gently in the breeze. Instant privacy, almost architectural in its beauty. But beneath that graceful exterior lies one of the most aggressive underground networks a plant has ever developed. Running bamboo doesn't simply grow where you plant it. It sends out underground rhizomes, thick, woody, sharp-tipped shoots in every direction, and it does this fast. We're talking 10 to 15 feet in a single growing season. These rhizomes aren't delicate little threads. They're powerful enough to punch through landscape fabric, crack concrete patios, and yes, there are documented cases of bamboo rhizomes breaking through building foundations. Here's what makes it particularly haunting. Those underground runners can dive 3 feet deep and travel quietly beneath fences, driveways, even under your neighbor's property line. People have woken up to find bamboo shoots emerging through garage floors, popping up 50 feet from where they originally planted. And even if you manage to dig it all out, microscopic rhizome fragments left in the soil will regenerate entire plants. The lesson here? Running bamboo would never go in the ground without industrial-strength rhizome barriers, buried at least 30 inches deep with fully overlapping seams, and even then, it demands constant vigilance. If you love the look of bamboo, there are beautiful clumping varieties that behave themselves. But running bamboo? Think of it less like a plant and more like a very slow, very patient invasion. Number 2, mint, the escaped prisoner. Gentle chime transition. Now this one surprises people every single time, because who could ever suspect mint? It smells wonderful. It's useful in the kitchen. It grows happily in pots on windowsills. It seems so harmless. But here's the truth about mint. Beneath those cheerful, fragrant leaves hides an underground agenda that's surprisingly ruthless. Mint spreads through underground runners and surface stolons, and it moves with real efficiency. Plant it directly in a garden bed, and within 1 season, it'll have claimed a 2-foot radius. By year 2, it's quietly colonized half the bed. By year 3, it's choking out everything else and appearing in places you never connected to the original plant. Any tiny fragment of root left in the soil will grow a new plant. You can't simply pull it up and call it done, because you will always leave pieces behind, and those pieces come back stronger. The golden rule that experienced gardeners learn sometimes the hard way is this: mint never goes in the ground. It lives in containers. And even those containers need regular checking, because mint will attempt to escape through every drainage hole it can find. It sounds almost comical until it's happening to you. Think of it this way. Mint is like that house guest who seemed delightful when they arrived, but over time, quietly moved into every room until there was no space left for anyone else. Containers only. Always. Number 3, Japanese knotweed, the foundation destroyer. Music deepens, slightly more serious tone. If bamboo the underground invader, Japanese knotweed is the siege weapon. This plant doesn't just spread, it destroys infrastructure in ways that can feel almost deliberate. Japanese knotweed grows from rhizomes that reach 7 feet deep and extend 60 feet outward from a single plant. Those rhizomes are capable of pushing through the tiniest cracks in concrete, asphalt, and building foundations, and as they grow thicker inside those cracks, they break structures apart from within. We're talking cracked driveways, damaged foundation walls, basement floors pushed upward. In the United Kingdom, this plant is taken so seriously that homeowners are legally required to disclose its presence when selling property. Many buyers simply walk away. Mortgage lenders factor it into property assessments. That's not a gardening problem anymore. That's a financial one. Here's the part that makes knotweed especially exhausting. It can grow 4 inches per day at peak season. Cut it down, it regrows from on the roots. Dig it up, any rhizome fragment the size of your fingernail will regenerate a complete plant. Professional eradication typically takes 3 to 5 years of repeated treatment and can cost thousands of dollars. This plant spread worldwide as an ornamental choice because it grows fast and looks lush. But that fast growth, it comes at a price most people never see on the label. Number 4, English ivy, the silent strangler. Soft, eerie ambient tone. There's a reason English ivy is on the cover of so many cottage garden magazines. Those deep, green, glossy leaves climbing old brick walls look genuinely beautiful. And that beauty is exactly why it gets away with what it does. English ivy climbs using tiny aerial rootlets that work their way into microscopic cracks in wood siding, mortar, and tree bark. As those rootlets thicken over time, they gradually pry apart whatever they've attached to. Mortar joints crumble, wood siding deteriorates, and trees mature, healthy trees, slowly suffocate. Here's something that stops most people in their tracks. A fully ivy-covered tree can carry hundreds of pounds of additional weight that the tree never evolved to support. That extra weight makes branches far more vulnerable to breaking in storms. The ivy also creates a perfect highway for pests and disease to reach the tree's canopy, and it doesn't stay put. Mature ivy produces berries that birds eat and spread everywhere into gutters, across rooftops, into neighboring gardens. Before long, you're finding ivy seedlings in places you'd never think to look. It seems so civilized, until suddenly it isn't. And by the time you notice, it's already done a great deal of damage. Beautiful? Absolutely. But this is one plant that loves your garden a little too much. Number 5, kudzu, the vine that swallowed the South. Music shifts more dramatic, cinematic. Some plants are problems. Kudzu is a phenomenon. This vine, originally brought from Japan and deliberately planted across the American South for erosion control, can grow a full foot per day at peak season. That's not gardening folklore. That's documented, measured, verified reality. A single kudzu plant can extend 60 feet in one growing season, climbing and covering everything in its path. Trees, shrubs, abandoned buildings, utility poles. It doesn't discriminate, it simply covers, smothers, and kills by blocking all sunlight from reaching whatever lies beneath. Current estimates place kudzu across more than 7 million acres in the southeastern United States. Drive through affected areas, and you'll see what looks like a green wave frozen in time rolling over forests, engulfing farmland, erasing entire landscapes. The roots can weigh hundreds of pounds and reach 10 feet deep. Cut the vines, you encourage more vigorous regrowth. Chemical control requires years of repeated applications. A single surviving root crown can regene. Rate the entire infestation. Thinking about planting kudzu for a privacy screen or slope control? Please don't. It's a bit like solving a small problem by creating a far larger one that future generations will still be dealing with. This isn't just a garden plant gone wrong. It's a lesson in how quickly good intentions can lead to ecological consequences we weren't prepared for. Number 6. Trumpet vine, the beautiful destroyer. Warm but cautionary tone. Oh, trumpet vine, those blazing orange and red blooms, the hummingbirds hovering outside your window, the lush, vigorous growth draped over a trellis on a summer afternoon. It really is spectacular. And then you find out what it's doing to your house. Trumpet vine spreads through underground runners that can travel 30 feet from the parent plant, popping up in the middle of your lawn, through mulch beds, right alongside your foundation. The vines themselves climb using aerial rootlets strong enough to tear siding off homes, rip gutter, loose, and damage wood structures. Here's how the story tends to go. Year 1, gorgeous. Year 2, breathtaking blooms. Year 3, you notice suckers appearing 15 feet away. Year 4, it's climbing the house, and the lawn is sprouting new shoots you can't explain. Professional landscapers specifically warn against planting trumpet vine near any structure, because once those rootlets get a grip and the vines mature, removal becomes a careful, time-consuming, multi-step process. The good news? You don't have to choose between hummingbirds and your home. Native alternatives exist that attract the same wildlife without the structural ambition. Gorgeous plant, complicated relationship. Number 7. Wisteria, the pergola crusher. Dreamy, then darkening tone. Few plants inspire the kind of wonder that wisteria does in full bloom. Those long, cascading clusters of purple flowers. That sweet, heady fragrance drifting across a spring garden. It genuinely looks like something out of a fairy tale. And then the vines get serious. Wisteria doesn't just climb, it twines and thickens, year after year, until mature vines can reach the diameter of a small tree trunk. That kind of woody, relentless growth exerts real force on whatever it's climbing. Pergolas splinter, arbors collapse, tree limbs fracture under the weight, gutters pull away from rooflines. There are real documented cases of wisteria actively deforming the structures it grows on, the vines twisting and compressing with such slow, constant pressure that wood warps and joints separate. It also seeds freely, scattering its offspring across the garden, each seedling carrying the same ambition as the parent. If you already have wisteria, pruning it aggressively multiple times per year is the only way to keep it from overwhelming its surroundings. Miss a season, and it will make up for lost time. The fairy tale is real, but like all good fairy tales, there's a dark side hiding just beneath the surface. Number 8. Bermuda grass, the unkillable lawn. Grounded, matter-of-fact tone. Here's a plant that holds a fascinating contradiction. It's one of the most popular lawn grasses in warm climates, and one of the most despised weeds in garden beds. And both things are completely true at the same time. Bermuda grass spreads through seeds, above-ground stolons, and underground rhizomes, essentially 3 different invasion routes operating simultaneously. In a single growing season, it can push 6 feet outward in every direction. It laughs at landscape fabric. It grows through mulch. It weaves itself around the roots of perennials and shrubs until it's nearly impossible to separate. And because it recovers faster than almost anything you could use against it, chemical control is extremely difficult without harming everything else nearby. The traits that make Bermuda grass a resilient, drought-tough lawn, its aggression, its spreading habit, its sheer stubbornness, are precisely what make it a nightmare anywhere else. For gardeners in warm climates trying to maintain defined beds and borders, it's often a near-daily battle. The grass doesn't respect boundaries. It simply decides where it wants to grow and grows there. Respect it for what it is. Just don't expect it to stay in its lane. Number 9. Bishop's weed, the variegated devil, slightly playful, then serious. It has such a pleasant name, bishop's weed, and those variegated leaves, that fresh green and cream, look genuinely lovely in shady spots where other plants struggle to thrive. But experienced gardeners have other names for this one. Most of them aren't suitable for a family channel. Bishop's weed spreads through underground rhizomes that shatter with almost comical ease. Every piece left behind in the soil grows a new plant. It forms dense, impenetrable colonies that crowd out everything else. And once it's established, removal becomes a multi-year commitment rather than an afternoon project. Here's how the story plays out almost every time. Someone plants it in a shady corner because it's one of the few things that will actually grow there. It looks great the first season, spreads nicely in the second. By the third season, it's jumped its borders and started arriving in adjacent beds. By year 5, it's truly everywhere, and getting rid of it means years of digging, sifting, and removing every last rhizome fragment by hand. Miss a piece, even a small one, and you're back to square one within a season. Beautiful in a photo, brutal in the ground. If you must have it, a container with no drainage holes touching soil is the only safe option. Number 10. Jerusalem artichoke, the eternal tuber. Warm, almost amused tone, then sobering. Jerusalem artichoke sounds wonderful on paper. It's a type of sunflower. It produces edible tubers that roast beautifully. It grows tall and cheerful. From a food garden perspective, it seems like a gift until you try to contain it. The tubers break apart almost instantly during harvest. Every fragment you miss, every small piece you didn't quite reach, will grow a new plant next season. The tubers can grow 6 feet deep. There are dozens of them per plant, and they're persistent in a way that borders on personal. Dig them up and you break more, and you've just planted next year's crop. Within a few seasons, Jerusalem artichoke has settled into your garden with a permanence that feels less like a vegetable and more like a long-term tenant you can't evict. If you want to grow them, and they genuinely are nutritious and lovely raised beds with solid bottoms, or areas you're happy to dedicate to them permanently, are the only safe approach. One season of harvesting, a lifetime of commitment. Pattern interrupt mid-video moment. After number 10. Music briefly softens direct address to viewer. If you've been nodding along to this list, maybe recognizing a plant or two from your own garden, I want you to know you're not alone, and you're not behind. Every gardener learns these lessons at some point. The goal is to learn them from this video, rather than from 3 years of battling something that didn't come with a warning label. If this content is helping you, please give it a like. It genuinely helps other gardeners find this information before they need it. And make sure you're subscribed to Rooted Aura so you never miss a video like this one. Now, let's get into the ones that get really serious. Herb. Number 11, Creeping Charlie, the lawn's quiet enemy. Calm, observational tone. It looks so harmless at first glance. Small rounded leaves, tiny purple flowers, growing low and flat along the ground. Creeping Charlie seems like it's barely there until one day you realize it's everywhere. This plant spreads through stolons that root every few inches, creating a dense, connected mat that edges out grass. It specifically targets the weak spots, shady, slightly damp areas where turf struggles and then expands outward from those footholds. What makes it particularly stubborn is its waxy leaf coating, which actually sheds many common herbicides. Even specialized treatments require multiple applications with no guarantee of full elimination. And here's the part most homeowners don't realize. Mowing spreads it. Every mower pass chops it into fragments that get scattered across the lawn, and those fragments root where they land. It's quiet, it's methodical, and it specifically chooses the places where your lawn is most vulnerable. Number 12, Horsetail, the prehistoric survivor, or inspiring, slightly foreboding tone. To understand why horsetail is essentially unkillable, consider this. It has been growing on this planet since the age of dinosaurs. It survived mass extinction events. It outlasted entire ecosystems. Your garden is not going to be the thing that stops it. Horsetail spreads through rhizomes that penetrate 6 feet deep into soil and are coated in a waxy layer that makes them nearly impervious to herbicides. The plants themselves contain silica, making them toxic to grazing animals and resistant to pests and disease. They reproduce by spores, not seeds, adding another layer of difficulty to any control effort. Gardeners who've battled horsetail describe it with a kind of quiet exhaustion. You dig for hours. You remove what looks like everything. Weeks later, it's back regrowing from fragments too deep to reach or too small to have noticed. Horsetail typically arrives in gardens through contaminated soil or plant material. One infected load of topsoil can introduce it to a garden that was perfectly clean before. The most honest advice: if you have it, focus on long-term management rather than eradication. This is a plant that has been winning for 300 million years. Patience and persistence are your best tools. Number 13, Tree of Heaven, the chemical warfare tree. Dramatic, cinematic tone. Here we are at number 13, and this is the one I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. Tree of Heaven grows fast. It thrives in poor soil. It tolerates pollution, drought, and neglect. It seems, in many ways, like an incredibly resilient and useful tree. But here's what's happening beneath the surface, quite literally. Tree of Heaven produces allelopathic compounds, chemicals that it releases into the surrounding soil specifically to inhibit the growth of competing plants. It doesn't just outcompete its neighbors, it poisons the ground against them, giving itself an advantage that feels almost unfair. On top of that, it spreads through prolific seed production and aggressive root suckering. A mature tree can produce hundreds of thousands of seeds in a single year. The root system sends up new shoots dozens of feet from the parent. Cut the tree down, the roots respond by sending up not one replacement, but dozens. Urban foresters list this tree among the most difficult invasive species to manage in North American cities. It colonizes disturbed ground, infrastructure cracks, vacant lots, then suppresses native vegetation and creates dense monocultures. This is a tree that doesn't just compete. It plays an entirely different game, and it stacks the rules in its own favor. Number 14, Russian Olive, the soil chemistry manipulator. Thoughtful, measured tone. Russian olive has genuine charm, silvery leaves, fragrant blossoms, tough enough to grow in difficult sites. It seems like a practical, attractive choice for challenging spots. But this tree has a hidden effect on the land around it. As a nitrogen fixer, Russian olive alters soil chemistry in ways that favor itself and weedy species while working against native plants that evolved in lower nitrogen environments. It spreads through bird-dispersed berries. It doesn't stay where you plant it. Birds carry seeds for miles, establishing new populations constantly, particularly in riparian corridors, where it crowds out native willows, cottonwoods, and other vital vegetation. Ecological restoration teams spend significant resources removing Russian olive from affected watersheds because its presence fundamentally changes how those ecosystems function. Dense thickets block wildlife movement, alter water access, and shift the plant community away from natives toward species that thrive in disturbed conditions. It's not just invasive. It reshapes the land to better suit its own needs, and undoing that transformation takes years of deliberate work. Number 15. Purple leucostrife. The wetland destroyer, soft but grave tone. If you've ever seen purple leucostrife in bloom along a waterway, those tall, vivid spikes of purple-pink flowers rising above the waterline, it's genuinely stunning, and that beauty is precisely why it found its way into, oh, so many gardens, and from there, into so many wetlands. A single purple leucostrife plant can produce millions of seeds per year. Those seeds travel by water, by wildlife, by boots and equipment. Once established in a wetland, the plant forms dense monocultures that squeeze out native sedges, rushes, and wildflowers, the plants that wetland birds, amphibians, and insects actually depend on for food and shelter. The ecological damage is quiet, but profound. A marsh that was once diverse and thriving becomes a purple leucostrife monoculture that looks beautiful to the human eye, but offers almost nothing to native wildlife. It's listed as invasive across much of North America. Removal is ongoing, and the seed bank in affected soils means new plants continue emerging for years after active plants are removed. If you garden near natural water, this one deserves serious attention. Number 16. Butterfly bush. The complicated charmer. Honest, nuanced tone. Butterfly bush seems like it should be a conservation success story. The flowers are fragrant. Adult butterflies really do flock to it. It's easy to grow and widely available, but the fuller picture is more complicated than it first appears. Butterfly bush produces thousands of tiny wind-carried seeds that spread readily into disturbed soils, forest edges, and riparian areas. Where it establishes, it displaces native shrubs that serve as larval host plants. The plant's caterpillars actually need to survive, not just nectar sources for adults. So while the flowers attract butterflies, the plant spreading into natural areas removes the foundation that supports complete butterfly life cycles. Newer cultivars labeled as sterile still produce viable seeds under many conditions. The most reliable approach, removing spent flower heads before they set seed, is rarely done consistently enough to prevent spread. For those genuinely committed to supporting butterfly populations, native alternatives like canflowers, milkweed, and native asters offer both nectar and critical larval habitat without the invasive spread. Good intentions, complicated consequences. Number 17. Chameleon plant. The unstoppable underground runner. Slightly exasperated, warm tone. Chameleon plant photographs beautifully. Those leaves splashed with red, cream, and soft green look like living art. In a container, it's genuinely stunning, but in the ground, it becomes one of the most regrettable planting decisions a gardener can make. This plant spreads through underground rhizomes that travel with startling speed and shatter at the slightest disturbance. Every fragment generates a new plant. Every attempt at removal multiplies the problem. Within one season of in-ground planting, it can spread 3 feet in all directions. By year 2, it's invaded adjacent beds. By year 3, it's in the lawn, in the cracks of pavement, and possibly in your neighbor's garden. There's also the matter of its distinctive fishy odor, which becomes very apparent when you're digging it up in frustration. Professional landscapers place chameleon plant among their least favorite ground covers to inherit, because removal requires either complete soil replacement or years of persistent treatment. In a pot, with no contact to open soil, lovely. In the ground, a commitment you didn't realize you were making. Number 18. Morning glory. The smothering vine. Light, then firm tone. Morning glory blooms are genuinely cheerful, those soft funnels of pink, white, and purple opening fresh, each morning like little promises. But the vine behind those blooms has ambitions that go well beyond charming. Morning glories grow rapidly, winding around any vertical surface they can find and pulling it downward under their cumulative weight. They produce seeds by the 100 seeds that can remain viable in soil for decades, and those seeds germinate readily whenever soil is disturbed. This creates what feels like an endless cycle. Pull this year's plants, and you're guaranteeing next year's crop. The bindweed varieties are especially persistent, with deep root systems that survive most surface-level removal attempts. The heart-shaped leaves have a natural coating that sheds many herbicides, making chemical control unreliable. The only effective long-term approach is catching vines before they set seed consistently, season after season, until the soil seed bank is eventually exhausted. That takes years. Cheerful flowers. Long-term obligation. Number 19, Yellow Archangel, the forest floor eliminator. Quiet, sobering tone. Yellow Archangel may be the least familiar plant on this list, but in many regions, it's among the most quietly devastating. Introduced as a shade-tolerant ornamental ground cover, Yellow Archangel does exactly what it promises. It covers ground in deep shade, spreading through stolons that root at every node, forming dense mats that nothing else can penetrate. The problem is that it doesn't respect garden boundaries. It escapes into natural forest understories, forming wall-to-wall carpets that smother spring wildflowers, trilliums, bloodroot, wild ginger, and dozens of other native species that entire ecological communities depend on. Forest regeneration slows. Pollinators lose food sources. The chain of impact ripples outward quietly. Forest managers in affected areas actively target Yellow Archangel for removal, but it's slow, labor-intensive work. Every fragment of stolon left behind can regenerate the mat. If you garden near woodland edges or natural areas, this one deserves a closer look before it becomes a neighbor to spaces you can't replant. Number 20, Black Locust, the root suckering colony. Cinematic, building, powerful closing tone, and here we are, number 20. The one I save for last, not because it's the most obscure, but because it represents something important. Black locust is genuinely useful. The wood is dense, rot-resistant, and highly valued. The tree grows fast in poor soil. It was planted for erosion control, for living fences, for practical hardwood production across North America and beyond. And every single one of those planted trees has been doing what black locust does, spreading. The root system sends suckers outward in all directions, sometimes dozens of feet from the parent tree, each one becoming a new tree, sending out its own suckers in turn. Within years, a single planted tree becomes a spreading colony of thorny, vigorous trees that exclude everything else. Cut them, you get 100 suckers in response. Treat with herbicide, the root system survives and sends up new shoots from reserves that can last for years. Black locust also fixes nitrogen and produces allelopathic compounds, altering soil chemistry to favor itself and disadvantage native plants. The thorns make manual clearing genuinely hazardous. Here's what makes it the perfect closing thought for this entire video. Black locust shows us that value and destruction aren't opposites. A plant can be genuinely useful, excellent wood, erosion control, wildlife value, and still be nearly impossible to manage once it's escaped its original purpose. The traits that made people want to plant it are the exact same traits that make it so difficult to live with. It didn't ask permission to spread. It doesn't need it. It just moves forward, sucker by sucker, year by year, until you make a deliberate decision to manage it, or you accept that it's quietly rewriting what your land looks like. And in a way, that's the lesson hiding inside every plant on this list. Conclusion. Music softens, warm, reflective. Here's what I want you to take away from today's video. None of these plants are villains. They're simply doing what plants do. Oh, growing, spreading, surviving, adapting. The problems arise when we plant them in the wrong places, without understanding what we're agreeing to. The best gardeners aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who keep learning, who ask the questions before they plant, who understand that a beautiful pot at the nursery can hold a very long commitment inside it. Knowing what not to plant is just as valuable as knowing what to grow. Sometimes more so. Call to action. Friendly, direct, warm. If today's video saved you from even one of these garden headaches, go ahead and give it a like. It helps Rooted Aura reach more gardeners who need this information before they need it. And I'd genuinely love to hear from you in the comments. Have you dealt with any of these plants? Which one gave you the hardest time, or which one are you now looking at in your garden with completely different eyes? I read every single comment, and there is nothing I enjoy more than hearing your real garden stories. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. We're here every week, talking honestly about what works, what doesn't, and how to build a garden that actually brings you peace instead of stress. Until next time, take care of your soil, trust your instincts, and keep growing. Rooted Aura.